Hey everyone, it's Reed. Before we get started, I know, it was a hard Tuesday and it's going to be a hard few weeks. But guys, the good news is we have each other and we still have a great place called America. Now, I know it may not feel like it, but I need you to stick with me. I need you to stick with this conversation. I need you to stick with the podcast and all of the people you're going to hear and get to meet over the course of the coming weeks and months. Guys, I can't tell you what's going to happen, but I can tell you this, it won't be nearly as bad if we stick together and do the work we need to do. And now, on with the show. Welcome back to the home front. I'm your host, Reed Galen. Today, I'm joined by Eric Swalwell, Democratic Congressman serving the 14th District of California. Congressman Swalwell has represented California in the House since 2013. For 8 years, he served on the House Intelligence Committee, where he led the House investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election, and later the first and second impeachments of Donald Trump. A week after January 6th, he was appointed as a House impeachment manager for Trump's Senate trial. He currently serves as a co-chair of the House Democratic Steering Committee and on the House Judiciary and Homeland Security Committees. Today, he's coming to us from Washington, D.C. Congressman Swalwell, welcome to the show.
Hey, Reed. Thanks for having me back.
No, thanks for coming. So, all right. Well, look, no need to avoid the elephant in the room. An outcome that was not only, look, Congressman, I always assumed that Donald Trump could win. I didn't think he would win, and I certainly didn't think that it would be the red wave that we avoided in 2022. So give me a sense to ask a stupid question. How you feeling?
You know what? I don't like it. I don't like the outcome. I fear, what it means for people who are immediately going to be affected. A young woman right now in Florida where a 6-week ban is the, law of the land. She's wondering, is she going to have a government mandated pregnancy? High school students everywhere are going to go to school today and live in a mass shooter culture where this guy is going to continue to arm the killers of our kids to the teeth. Ukrainians right now are in the trenches and they just watched their best ally walk away from them. So, there are a lot of people who are hurt and will be hurt immediately by this. And so if they can get up today and do what they have to do to protect themselves and protect, freedom, I can do it, you can do it, and I'm going to do it. And I'm not going to spend too much time feeling sorry for myself because, too many people are counting on us, to get our shit together and get it right and move forward.
I think that's right. Look, I do think that broadly speaking, there's probably some pretty serious study and thought that needs to go into what goes forward, what comes next. But let me ask you this. I mean, I was lucky enough to travel all over the country this past fall to many of the target states, and I saw and met incredible people. But a lot of places too, Congressman, where it seems like there was a time when an area or a district might have been a big D Democratic stronghold that had gone Republican, let's say in the last 8 or 10 years. How do you see the party making its way back into the places that it traditionally represented? And I use that word intentionally, not just in Congress, but also represented ideologically, politically, in that sort of thing. How do Democrats get back to that? How do they literally back to the roots?
I think it's sometimes as simple as just being more plain spoken and authentic. You know, Personality will beat policy every single day of the week. That doesn't mean just bring a big personality, into a campaign, but personality can reflect what your values are, what your principles are, what your priorities are. But I just think too often we're trying to win a Harvard Law School moot court competition, and this is really just a gut check, at the local bar or at the American Legion Hall. Like that's what this is. And sometimes I think we lead too much with the policy when they first just want to know, like, who are you? What's your story? What are you going to do for me? And I think finding candidates who can deliver on that is going to work. Ruben Gallego, I think, is one of the best examples here. Look, he just defied gravity by winning, or he's going to win. It'll be called soon, a state that Kamala Harris lost. Now, I think Alyssa Slotkin is going to be the only other person who will do that.
I think Tammy Baldwin will too.
And Tammy Baldwin, yeah.
Right. But they're all squeakers.
Yep, they're all squeakers. I think what's unique about Rubin also is that Rubin ran his own campaign and told his own story. He campaigned at rodeos, boxing matches, soccer events, and he went out to the tribes in Arizona. He would drive hours to go to places that didn't have cell phone reception, but by word of mouth, it would get around the whole state that he was sitting down with the different tribes. And so I think we have to kind of get away from some of this, as I said, traditional campaign where we have a 97 point, plan for whatever, and just
Right.
kind of lead with personality that reflects what we're going to do.
Well, and I think, Congressman, that's the one thing that you have done, and you represent a lot of that, which is, and I say this as a former Republican who's worked alongside Democrats now for, it's all hard to believe, almost 5 years. Is there's a lot of worry, right? There's a lot of, well, what if we have a misstep? What if we do something wrong? Where again, I understand that sort of intellectually, right? The concept of sort of first do no harm. But to your point, it's impossible to be authentic. It's impossible to be your total self if the whole thing you're worried about is like, did I say, was this word wrong? Was that word wrong? Because the truth is that, if you're going to the rodeo, right, and you say something offhand, most people don't care, right? Most people aren't paying attention. And to your point, and there was someone from the state of Missouri who said this, a lot of places in America aren't necessarily red. They're uncontested. And so I think what you're talking about with somebody like Gallego is going to the places where nobody ever went. And they're like, hey, Ruben, nobody ever came here before. You're the first person to come here.
Reed, that's absolutely right. And you know what? If you mess up, who gives a shit? Everyone else around you has messed up on something. And one rule I have, whenever I do like a video, like a selfie video or an Instagram story, or I'm recording something and I trip up and say something, and my instinct is to just re-record it, I always stop and acknowledge that I screwed it up, and I just keep going because I think that's who I am. Like, people don't want to
Right.
see the seventh take; they just want to see the first take. And I would just recommend we do more of that, and I promise you're not going to suffer any consequence because of that. But you just made a good point though, about uncontested areas. What we have to do, and I will say, Bill Clinton was doing this to try and help Kamala Harris, in the closing weeks, is we have to close the margins. We're not going to win many of these counties in the rurals, but if we can close the margin from 80-20 to 70-30 in a lot of these counties, that is the difference right there. And I think having a plan for, as you said, the uncontested areas to just bring the margins down certainly is going to have to be a part of what comes next.
Well, and that was the other part too, was I am likely to leave the Twitter platform forthwith, but I haven't yet. But on Wednesday, I was going back and forth with some people who were asking questions, and somebody said something. I can't even remember exactly what it was, but I said, we can't retreat anymore. We're out of territory, right? Like, we've lost a lot of ground. Like, we are now at a place where it's like, okay, there's nowhere else for us to go, right? Like, we are at the water's edge, and the water's at our back. We gotta advance back up the beach, politically, socially, culturally. And I think that's the other part too, is maybe sometimes, whether or not it's a party or a movement, sometimes you need that, right? Sometimes you need that sort of shock to the system to say, okay, guys, we're losing places we should win. We are losing places we have won. And it could be for any variety of reasons. And I don't want to get into a political science discussion here. But when you have millions of voters, Congressman, who otherwise should vote for you just sitting it out, right? To me, that says, okay, like, we have a lot of electoral work to do, but there's also just a lot of community building work to do, which is, I'll tell you this candidly, and I mean no offense by it, is I met a lot of people who said, yeah, they'd vote for the vice president, but there was no emotional connection either to her or to the party, right? It's just that they didn't like Trump. And that's a tough way to win elections, as you know, as someone who's won so many.
That's right. And the good news here is this is Trump's last election. We're not running against Trump in the future. It's a jump ball right now for whoever wants to be the leader of our party. And I actually think the exercise of seeing who steps up in these coming months, to try and do that, and the effort among so many talented people to do that is going to motivate us. But first things first, because people have asked me, what can we do? Stop telling me to stop grieving and give me a to-do list. Someone texted me that this morning. So here's the first to-do list item that we have, which is in a couple weeks, we are going to find out who Donald Trump is going to put in place to execute Trump's Project 2025. Who's going to be the Attorney General, who's going to be in charge of healthcare, who's going to lead the Department of Defense, who's going to be the Secretary of State. All of these people who will set America's policies domestically and abroad. And so we're not helpless. These people don't just fall out of the sky. They're confirmed by senators, and they're confirmed by senators who are up for reelection in 2026. And so we're going to have to do the vetting, and we're going to have to use our agency to hold these senators accountable. They don't have, a wipeout majority in the Senate. And so as, this rogues gallery of, Kash Patel and Rick Grinnell and others come before the Senate, we need to make sure that, we are very loudly expressing, our expectations for who should be in this cabinet.
Well, and it's actually interesting you bring up those two, Grinnell and Patel, because I saw somewhere, Congressman, that they are the two leading candidates to be Director of Central Intelligence. And as someone who served on the Intelligence Committee for many years, I mean, these guys aren't qualified to be the ones who make sure that you've parked within the lines in the Langley parking lot, let alone sitting on the seventh floor, of the Central Intelligence Agency building. And to your point, I think this is really a brilliant idea, which is one of them will be chosen, right? And one of them theoretically will have to go before the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. I assume that's the committee that would interview them. And as you know, Congressman, that's the one thing that I try and always explain to my Democratic friends is the things that we need to say that the American people need to hear, these people all say out loud. They do these things out in public. They don't hide behind closed doors. They say and do crazy things in person. When Grinnell was ambassador to Germany, right, he went out of his way to insult people on a regular basis. They both say crazy things on social media. And to your point, I think you almost have to appeal to the senators. My dad, who worked on the Hill for many years, used to say the thing about senators is if they could still wear togas to work, they would. You have to almost indulge their arrogance, right? Like, you're really going to put this guy in charge of the nation's intelligence community.
And by the way, Rick Grinnell, when he was ambassador to Germany, there's a very famous publicly, distributed photo with Rick and a member of the AfD party, which is the closest thing to a neo-Nazi party that Germany has. And so that's who he was palling around with when he was representing America's interests in Germany. So we're not helpless. Be upset. Grief is okay, but we are not helpless. And as I said, if that young woman who's, in a state with a 6-week ban can wake up today and find hope, and if the students who are going to go to school today in a mass shooting culture can find hope, and that Ukrainian soldier who's in the trenches right now and just saw their ally abandon them can find hope, like we can get up to, we can be upset, but we have to stay in this fight. So I'm not going away. You're not going away. Folks on the outside who did all of the work are not going away. And yes, it does feel like you just finished, a 26.2 mile marathon, and at the finish line, you're told, "Hey, we need you to go run one more of these." I know
Right.
that's not
Well,
comforting.
after somebody punched you in the stomach at the finish line.
That's right. That's right. So, but we got to do it. There's just no other. There's no other choice. As you said, we're at the water's edge. We got to do it.
So let me zoom in. And for our listeners, tell us a little bit about California's 14th district.
So I represent one of the most diverse districts in the country. 40% of my constituents in the East Bay area. This is essentially between San Jose and Oakland on the East Bay side. 40% were born outside of the United States. And so when Donald Trump, talks about, mass deportation and that immigrants, are the problem, uh, he should probably look at the numbers, because my district is the 13th wealthiest district in America. And it's not an accident that we're so diverse. It's the resilience that so many of these immigrants have brought to our country that have made the district a biotech and tech leader in the country. And by the way, the city of Fremont, which is in my district, has the Tesla manufacturing facility where an immigrant by the name of Elon Musk, who was in a illegal status for some time, built that facility, and so we have benefited in my district from immigrants. That's where I come from. We also produce some of the best wine in California with 80 wineries, and guess who tends to the grapes at harvest time? It's a migrant workforce, just like everywhere else in California, as we are the leading agriculture producer in the country. So, if Donald Trump wants this mass deportation, he's going to see, prices go up for all of us on our groceries.
No, and just on that last note, if you haven't ever driven through the Central Valley, excuse me, or some of the highways and byways there, it really is. And Congressman, you could do it more justice than I can. But guys, it is really incredible to see how much of what we take for granted at the grocery store, as far as fruits and vegetables and everything else, and even cattle, right, comes directly out of the Central Valley of California. It is an incredible amount. I mean, that's the reason they call it the country's breadbasket. There's probably, with the exception maybe of Ukraine, Congressman, I don't think there's any place else like it in the world.
That's right. But I do think as Democrats, we have to be the sensible ones on immigration. Like, let's be all about a tough border. Like, I want a tough border. I don't want any perception that our border is open, because I know that can inspire people, to want to come here. I want us to have a tough border, but I also want us to address the workforce crisis that we have, where immigrants fill the jobs. And it doesn't take much imagination to have a tough border, but also a legal immigration process that can address the workforce needs. And so that is where we should be as Democrats. I think if we spend too much time fighting Donald Trump on, border security, we could send the message to voters that we don't care about border security. And so I would not recommend that, we get in a place where we are seen as not caring about security at the border.
Well, and look, I mean, I went to high school and college in Texas, and so, I mean, I can attest that there are plenty of people who live along the Rio Grande Valley who also agree, right? Like, it's not that they're anti-immigration, it's that they too, because they are literally right there at the end of the bridge, want to know, okay, we should probably have an idea of who these people are, right? And I think that's the other point, Congressman, which is that's not unreasonable.
It's not.
It's not. All right. So, Congressman, before we let you go, you mentioned you do Instagram videos and all that. Where can we find you on social media? And where can we find more about you and your district?
Well, thank you for that. It's at Eric Swalwell. That's for Instagram. And then also at Eric Swalwell for Twitter. And I'm just like you, Reed. I told my wife yesterday, I don't know if I want to stay on Twitter
Right.
because of Musk and this billionaire class that just bought the presidency. And my wife said to me, she said, "But what about all the people who follow you and, find, inspiration and hope in what you and your colleagues are doing?" So I don't know. I'm still torn. I don't have all the answers either. So I know that we're all thinking this through right now, but we better come up with a plan soon.
Right. Well, as always, gang, I can make an offering, which is SezUs, SEZ.US. It is Joe Trippi and me and a bunch of other people building a social media platform for sane and thoughtful individuals. So go on over there. As always, gang, you can find me on Twitter still and TikTok at Reed Galen, on Threads and Instagram at Reed_Galen USA, and on Substack at the home front as well. Last thing, guys, before you go, as the congressman noted, guys, we got a lot of work to do. The union, jointheunion.us, is not going anywhere. We have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of places to visit. We have a lot of people to meet. Go to jointheunion.us. Congressman Eric Swalwell, thanks for joining me.
Of course. Thank you, Reed.
And everybody else, we'll see you next time.